Essentialism by Greg McKeown, full book summary. Are you constantly overwhelmed by endless tasks and responsibilities? Do you ever feel like you're busy but not productive? What if there was a way to do less but achieve more? In Essentialism by Greg McKeown, you'll discover a mindset and practice that helps you cut through the noise of modern life and focus on what really matters. In this video, we'll break down the key ideas from this transformative book, chapter by chapter, and show you how to regain control over your choices and time. Are you ready to become an essentialist? Chapter 1. The Essentialist. Imagine standing in front of two paths. One path is chaotic and cluttered, filled with distractions and endless tasks pulling you in every direction. It's the road most of us travel every day. We say yes to everything, juggle more than we can handle, and feel stretched too thin. The other path is clear, calm, and direct. There are only a few things to focus on, but these things are deeply important. This second path is the way of the essentialist. Greg McKeown opens Essentialism by introducing us to this concept. The essentialist mindset. Being an essentialist is not about doing more or less work, but doing the right work, the essential work. It's about eliminating the trivial distractions that steal our time and energy, allowing us to focus on what truly matters. Think about how often we say yes to requests or commitments that don't align with our core priorities. How many times have you agreed to something because you didn't want to disappoint someone? Maybe you feared missing out on an opportunity, or perhaps you just couldn't say no. We've all been there. McKeown calls this the non-essentialist trap, a lifestyle where we feel we have to do everything, where we're constantly overcommitted and yet underperforming in the areas that matter most. The essentialist, on the other hand, doesn't live this way. They make conscious choices about what to take on, and, more importantly, what to decline. The essentialist lives by the mantra, less but better. This isn't about getting more things done. It's about getting the right things done. By focusing on the few things that truly move the needle, essentialists are able to achieve more meaningful results without burning out. McKeown tells us that to embrace this mindset, we must first change how we see the world. The non-essentialist thinks, I have to do this, but the essentialist reframes this thought as, I choose to do this. This seemingly small shift in mindset gives us back control over our time and energy. It's about realizing that we are the creators of our own lives, not passive recipients of other people's demands. In this chapter, McKeown sets the stage by explaining how most of us are trapped in a cycle of overcommitment. We are overwhelmed by too many options, opportunities, and expectations, which leads to the dilution of our efforts. Instead of being masters of our time, we become slaves to busyness, checking off endless to-do lists, but never really accomplishing anything of significance. The non-essentialist tries to do it all, thinking that saying yes to every opportunity will lead to success. However, this scattergun approach often leads to failure or mediocrity. The essentialist, in contrast, only says yes to the things that are truly important and impactful. This requires a deliberate effort to filter out the non-essential and focus solely on what brings value. McKeown emphasizes that this isn't about working harder or managing time more efficiently. Time management techniques, productivity hacks, and working longer hours won't solve the core issue. What will solve the problem is changing how we approach our lives. We need to accept that not everything matters equally. In fact, most things don't matter at all. The key to living like an essentialist is to constantly ask yourself, is this essential? If the answer is no, it's time to eliminate it. As we start to adopt this mindset, we learn that life becomes simpler. Instead of being pulled in 100 different directions, we start to focus our energy on the things that bring the greatest returns. We prioritize the essential over the trivial. This process, however, requires courage. It means saying no to good opportunities so that we can say yes to the right ones. It means cutting out the noise to make space for the signal. McKeown introduces us to a powerful metaphor: life as a closet. Just as a cluttered, overflowing closet becomes difficult to manage, so does a life packed with non-essential activities. The key to organizing a closet isn't just to keep adding more hangers or shoving things into the back. The key is to declutter, to remove the things that no longer fit or serve you. Essentialism is about applying this same principle to your life. It's about continuously editing and curating your commitments and tasks until only the essential remains. As the chapter comes to a close, McKeown leaves us with a question that becomes central to the book. What is truly essential in your life? Until you can answer that question with clarity, you will remain stuck in the cycle of non-essentialism. But once you begin to discern the essential from the non-essential, you will find that your life becomes more meaningful, more focused, and more productive. This is just the beginning of our journey into the world of essentialism, where we'll explore how to reclaim control of our lives, filter out distractions, and focus on what truly matters. Stay tuned for the next chapter as we dive deeper into the power of choice and how it plays a crucial role in living like an essentialist. Chapter 2. Choose: the invincible power of choice. As we continue down the path of essentialism, Greg McKeown introduces a concept that's both liberating and intimidating: the power of choice. He argues that many of us have forgotten or relinquished our ability to choose. How often do we go through our days feeling like we have to do things? We say, "I don't have a choice," or "I have to get this done." But the truth, McKeown insists, is that we always have a choice. Every moment of our lives is a series of choices, whether we recognize them or not. The idea that we have control over our own choices is incredibly empowering, but it also means we can no longer blame our circumstances for our busyness and overwhelm. To live like an essentialist, we must reclaim our agency and start making deliberate choices about where we focus our time and energy. McKeown tells the story of how society, institutions, and even our own minds have conditioned us to believe we are powerless. From childhood, we are taught to comply with the expectations of others, to follow rules, and to meet deadlines. We learn that saying no or choosing differently comes with consequences. Over time, we begin to equate busyness with success and availability with importance. Saying yes becomes second nature, and the more we say yes, the less room we leave for what truly matters. One of the most eye-opening points in this chapter is the distinction between being busy and being productive. Many of us fall into the trap of thinking that if we're always in motion, we're achieving something. But McKeown points out that motion does not equal progress. Just because we're doing a lot doesn't mean we're doing anything meaningful. In fact, the more we say yes to non-essential tasks, the further we drift from the things that matter most. The essentialist realizes that every yes is a choice. It's a choice to commit time and energy to one thing at the expense of another. This leads us to an important truth. Whenever we say yes to one thing, we are simultaneously saying no to something else. If you say yes to a last-minute work request, you might be saying no to quality time with your family. If you say yes to attending a meeting that isn't aligned with your priorities, you might be saying no to working on a project that is. The power of choice is often neglected because we fall into a pattern of automatic decisions. We feel pressured to be agreeable, to please others, or to keep up appearances. But the essentialist understands that choice is not just a right, it's a responsibility. The more conscious we become of our choices, the more control we have over our lives. The key, McKeown argues, is to pause before committing to anything. This pause gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves, is this the best use of my time and energy? This process of deliberation can feel foreign at first. After all, we live in a world where speed is valued and decisions are often made in the heat of the moment. But essentialism requires us to slow down. It asks us to become intentional about how we use our most precious resources, time and energy. McKeown highlights that when we exercise our power of choice, we also begin to shift the way others perceive us. If you've always been the person who says yes to everything, it may come as a shock to others when you start saying no. But McKeown encourages us to stand firm. When we choose not to do something, we are not saying it's unimportant. We're simply saying it's not the most important thing right now. By doing so, we create space for what truly matters. One practical example McKeown gives is the clarity of purpose test. When faced with a new opportunity or request, ask yourself, does this activity or commitment align with my core purpose? If the answer is no, then you should consider whether it's worth your time. The problem is, many of us haven't clearly defined our purpose. This is where essentialism becomes not just a practice of eliminating the unnecessary, but also a journey of self-discovery. By learning what matters most to us, we gain the clarity needed to make better choices. McKeown also points out that some choices are harder than others. There will be times when saying no feels uncomfortable, and we might worry about disappointing others. But living like an essentialist means making the hard choices. It means being willing to say no to short-term pleasures or obligations so that we can say yes to long-term fulfillment. Over time, this ability to choose becomes a muscle we strengthen, and with each decision we make, we become more aligned with our true priorities. This chapter is a powerful reminder that life doesn't just happen to us. We are active participants, constantly making choices that shape our lives. The essentialist realizes that it's not enough to go with the flow or to default to yes. We must consciously choose the few things that matter and eliminate the rest. McKeown challenges us to rethink how we've been conditioned to live. Instead of following the crowd, chasing every opportunity, or trying to meet everyone's expectations, the essentialist takes control of their choices. And with that control comes freedom, the freedom to focus, to excel, and to live a life of meaning. Chapter 3. Discern, the unimportance of practically everything. Imagine walking into a room filled with clutter, papers piled high on the desk, scattered knickknacks covering every surface, and boxes stacked in the corners. It's overwhelming, right? You're not sure where to start, and before you know it, you feel paralyzed by the sheer amount of stuff surrounding you. Now imagine that room is your life. That's what it feels like when you're weighed down by too many commitments, too many tasks, too many distractions. And here's the hard truth. Most of these things don't matter. In Chapter 3, Greg McKeown introduces a fundamental principle of essentialism. Almost everything is unimportant. While this may sound like a bold statement, McKeown makes it clear that the vast majority of things we invest our time and energy into are trivial. We often treat everything as though it's of equal importance, but the reality is that only a few things truly matter. The challenge is learning to discern the vital few from the trivial many. Our modern world bombards us with choices. We have endless options for how we can spend our time. Social media, email, meetings, projects, side gigs, personal development, and the list goes on. With so many options available, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to do it all. We fear missing out, so we say yes to everything. But McKeown argues that this approach leads to mediocrity. By trying to spread ourselves too thin, we end up achieving very little of significance. The essentialist, however, learns to master the art of discernment. Discernment is the ability to see the difference between what is truly essential and what is not. It's about cutting through the noise and focusing on the few things that make the biggest impact. McKeown uses the metaphor of a diamond cutter to illustrate this idea. A skilled diamond cutter knows exactly where to cut to reveal the brilliance of the stone. Similarly, an essentialist knows where to focus their efforts to bring out the best results. But how do we develop this ability to discern? McKeown offers a simple yet powerful strategy: the 90% rule. When faced with a decision, whether it's taking on a new project, agreeing to a meeting, or making a personal commitment, rate the opportunity on a scale of 0 to 100. If it's not a 90 or higher, it's a no. This might sound harsh, but the point is to raise our standards for what we allow into our lives. By setting a high bar, we ensure that we only commit to the things that are truly aligned with our priorities. Another key point McKeown makes in this chapter is the concept of opportunity cost. Every time we say yes to one thing, we are implicitly saying no to something else. The non-essentialist often overlooks this fact and assumes that by saying yes to more, they're increasing their chances of success. But in reality, saying yes to non-essential activities often means saying no to the most important ones. This is why discernment is so critical. When you recognize that most opportunities are distractions, it becomes easier to say no to them. McKeown gives several examples of how successful people use discernment to focus on what matters. For instance, Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in the world, is known for his ability to say no to almost everything. He focuses on a small number of investments that he believes will yield the highest returns, rather than diversifying across hundreds of opportunities. This focus on the essential few has been a key factor in his success. Another example McKeown highlights is Steve Jobs, who was notorious for his ruthless prioritization. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was struggling with a bloated product line and declining profits. Jobs slashed Apple's product offerings from 350 down to just 10, focusing the company's efforts on a handful of core products. This act of radical focus was instrumental in turning Apple into one of the most valuable companies in the world. The lesson here is clear. Success isn't about doing more. It's about doing less, but doing it better. The essentialist learns to say no to the many good things in order to focus on the few great things. But saying no is difficult. We live in a culture that values busyness, and it can be uncomfortable to turn down opportunities, especially when they seem promising. However, McKeown reminds us that the cost of not saying no is far greater. When we fail to eliminate the non-essential, we end up cluttering our lives with activities that drain our time, energy, and focus. In this chapter, McKeown also touches on the psychological barriers that prevent us from discerning the essential. One of the biggest barriers is the fear of missing out, FOMO. We worry that by saying no to an opportunity, we'll miss out on something amazing. But the truth is, by saying yes to too many things, we're already missing out on something far more important, the ability to focus on what really matters. Another psychological barrier is the social pressure to conform. We feel obligated to say yes to requests from friends, family, and colleagues because we don't want to disappoint them or seem uncooperative. But McKeown challenges us to rethink this. He suggests that by saying no to non-essential commitments, we're actually doing ourselves and others a favor. When we focus on the essential, we're able to deliver higher quality work and be more present in our relationships. McKeown also introduces the idea of the paradox of success. Early in our careers, we often achieve success by being open to opportunities and saying yes to many things. But as we become more successful, the number of opportunities increases, and saying yes to everything becomes unsustainable. The very strategy that helped us succeed can now lead to our downfall if we don't learn to prioritize and discern the essential from the non-essential. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that discernment is not just a skill, it's a way of life. It requires constant practice and vigilance. The essentialist must always be on the lookout for distractions, asking the question, is this essential? If the answer is no, it's time to eliminate it. Chapter 4. Trade-off. Which problem do I want? Imagine you are walking down a road, and it suddenly splits into two paths. You can only go down one, but each path offers different rewards and different challenges. Whichever one you choose, the other is no longer available to you. This is the essence of making trade-offs, a critical element of essentialism. In Chapter 4, Greg McKeown highlights that life is full of trade-offs. We can't have it all, no matter how much we might want to. The question then becomes, which problem do you want to solve? Which trade-off are you willing to make? Trade-offs are everywhere. We face them in small ways every day. Do we spend the evening working late or with family? Should we take on an additional project at work or focus on doing fewer tasks better? But trade-offs also happen in larger, more life-altering ways. Should you pursue a high-paying but unfulfilling career or a passion that may not provide financial security? Each decision comes with its own set of challenges, and in most cases, we can't have both. The essentialist understands that making the right trade-offs is crucial to achieving success and satisfaction in life. The non-essentialist, McKeown explains, tries to do it all. They operate under the illusion that if they just work hard enough or stay busy enough, they can avoid making trade-offs altogether. They want to keep every door open, and as a result, they often end up frustrated and spread too thin. The reality is that not making a trade-off is, in itself, a trade-off. When you refuse to choose between two paths, you're still making a choice, one that usually leads to mediocrity and burnout. The essentialist, on the other hand, embraces trade-offs. They understand that life is about making difficult decisions and accepting that every yes comes with a no. By deliberately choosing to focus on fewer things, they give themselves the time and energy to excel in the areas that truly matter. McKeown points out that when we avoid making trade-offs, we end up sacrificing quality in all areas. Instead of doing a few things exceptionally well, we end up doing many things poorly. One of the key lessons in this chapter is that trade-offs aren't about giving up something bad for something good. Often, the choices we face are between two good things. This makes it even harder to decide. However, McKeown stresses that we need to evaluate these decisions based on what will bring the highest value to our lives and align with our essential goals. McKeown introduces us to the story of Rosa Parks to illustrate this point. In 1955, Parks made a deliberate choice not to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. This decision came with trade-offs. She risked arrest, persecution, and even harm to herself and her family. But by choosing to stand her ground, Parks sparked a movement that changed the course of history. Her choice was not without significant costs, but the trade-off was worth it because it aligned with her core beliefs about justice and equality. This story reminds us that trade-offs are often difficult, but they can also be powerful. When we make deliberate choices about where to focus our time and energy, we can create a meaningful impact, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of others. However, it requires courage. The essentialist understands that making the right trade-off means being willing to sacrifice some things in order to achieve something greater. Another important concept in this chapter is what McKeown calls strategic underachievement. This might sound counterintuitive in a world that values success and achievement, but McKeown argues that in order to succeed at the essential, we must be willing to fail at the non-essential. This doesn't mean we intentionally seek to fail, but rather that we accept the trade-off that comes with choosing the vital few over the trivial many. For example, a highly successful entrepreneur might choose to focus entirely on building their business, knowing that this means they'll have to miss out on some social events, hobbies, or even some aspects of family life. This is a deliberate trade-off, and while it may involve underachievement in certain areas, it allows for extraordinary achievement in the one area that matters most. McKeown urges us to ask ourselves, which problem do I want? Every decision comes with its own set of problems, and avoiding the trade-off doesn't eliminate the problem. It just changes its form. For instance, if you say yes to taking on a new work project because you don't want to disappoint your boss, you might end up overworking yourself and burning out. On the other hand, if you say no to the project, you may risk disappointing your boss, but you protect your time and energy for the projects that truly matter. Making trade-offs is not always easy, but McKeown reminds us that it's a critical part of living a life of purpose and intention. The essentialist is not afraid to make difficult choices because they understand that these choices lead to greater clarity, focus, and success. It's about being willing to let go of some good things in order to achieve great things. McKeown offers practical strategies for making better trade-offs. One technique is to always pause before making a decision. Don't rush into saying yes or no. Give yourself the time to weigh the options carefully. Ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what will I have to say no to? This question forces us to consider the hidden costs of our decisions. Often, we say yes without fully realizing the trade-offs involved. Another strategy is to practice what McKeown calls the gentle art of saying no. Saying no can feel uncomfortable, especially when we fear disappointing others or missing out on opportunities. But the essentialist knows that saying no is not a rejection of the person making the request. It's simply a choice to protect your own priorities. McKeown suggests framing the no in a positive way by explaining what you're saying yes to instead. For example, if someone asks you to take on an additional project, you could say, I would love to help, but I'm currently focusing on delivering the best results for the projects I've already committed to. The chapter also emphasizes that trade-offs don't just apply to work or personal commitments. They apply to every aspect of life. Whether it's how we spend our money, how we allocate our time, or even how we manage our relationships, trade-offs are a part of everything we do. The essentialist takes the time to evaluate these trade-offs carefully, ensuring that their decisions align with their core values and goals. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that trade-offs are unavoidable, but they don't have to be burdens. Instead, they can be opportunities to focus on what truly matters. The key is to make these decisions intentionally, rather than letting them happen by default. When we learn to embrace trade-offs, we gain the clarity and focus needed to excel in the areas that bring us the most value. Chapter 5. Explore. Escape to focus. Imagine you are preparing for a big journey. You're standing at a crossroads, but before you take a single step, you need to know where you're going. However, there's a catch. The path to your destination isn't clearly marked. It's not a matter of simply following a map. Instead, you need to explore, take detours, and ask yourself important questions before you can even begin to know which direction is the right one. This process of exploration is exactly what Greg McKeown emphasizes in Chapter 5 of Essentialism. It's about making the time and space to explore what is truly essential. In our fast-paced, hyper-connected world, we are often pressured to make quick decisions, to act now, and to respond instantly. The culture of immediacy makes us feel like we don't have time to pause, let alone reflect on what we're doing. However, McKeown argues that without giving ourselves the space to explore and evaluate our options, we can never truly know what's essential. The essentialist, therefore, makes it a priority to create moments of quiet and reflection, recognizing that clarity comes from careful exploration, not from rushing into decisions. The exploration McKeown is talking about isn't just a mental process. It's also about physically removing ourselves from the distractions and pressures of daily life, so we can think deeply. He tells the story of one of the most famous explorers of all time, Isaac Newton. In 1665, Newton retreated to his family's estate in the countryside during the Great Plague of London, where he spent 2 years away from the distractions of university life. In that time, he formulated his theories of gravity, optics, and calculus. Newton's period of retreat became known as his Annus Mirabilis, or miracle year. McKeown uses this example to show that profound discoveries and essential thinking happen when we make space for exploration. But how does this exploration work in the context of essentialism? It begins with giving yourself permission to step back from the relentless pace of life. McKeown explains that when we're constantly busy, we're not thinking, we're just reacting. True essentialists carve out time to pause, reflect, and ask themselves key questions. What am I really trying to achieve? What's most important right now? What is truly essential in this situation? These are not questions you can answer in the 5 minutes between meetings or during a busy workday. They require space, physical, mental, and emotional space. McKeown suggests creating buffers in your schedule, times when you're not working or actively doing anything. These escape times allow you to think creatively and strategically. They give you the chance to break free from the reactive cycle of constant busyness and look at your life from a higher perspective. One powerful way to explore what's essential is to engage in play. This might sound strange in a book about focus and productivity, but McKeown argues that play is an essential part of creative exploration. Play allows our minds to wander, explore new ideas, and connect seemingly unrelated concepts. It's through play that we often find our most innovative solutions to problems. When we engage in unstructured play, we give our brains the freedom to think in ways they can't when we're in the rigid, logical mode of everyday life. McKeown points to research showing that many of history's greatest innovators made time for play. Take Thomas Edison, for example. While he's often remembered for his work ethic and long hours in the lab, Edison also made time for play and experimentation. He would engage in playful activities like building models or conducting random experiments, which often led to unexpected breakthroughs. This play was an integral part of his creative process. The idea here is that play opens up our minds to new possibilities. It takes us out of the narrow, task-focused mindset and allows us to see things from a broader perspective. When we're constantly working or focused on getting things done, we tend to miss the big picture. But by taking time to play and explore, we give ourselves the freedom to discover what's truly essential. In addition to play, McKeown emphasizes the importance of reading and learning as part of the exploration process. The essentialist knows that they don't have all the answers, and they seek out new knowledge and insights to guide their decisions. Reading widely, whether it's books, articles, or listening to podcasts, gives us new perspectives and ideas. It helps us see connections that we might have missed, and opens us up to new ways of thinking about our goals and priorities. But exploration isn't just about intellectual pursuits, it's also about connecting with others. McKeown encourages essentialists to seek out mentors, coaches, and peers who can provide valuable insights and guidance. Sometimes we are too close to our own problems to see the best solution. By talking with others and getting their input, we can gain fresh perspectives and refine our understanding of what's essential. McKeown also highlights the importance of taking time to reflect on past experiences. One of the most valuable forms of exploration is looking back at what has worked for you in the past and what hasn't. What were the projects or tasks that brought you the greatest sense of accomplishment and satisfaction? What were the things that drained your energy without producing meaningful results? By reflecting on these questions, we can start to identify patterns and themes that point us toward our essential priorities. Exploration is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. The essentialist understands that they must continually create space for exploration, whether it's through play, learning, reflection, or conversation. This exploration allows them to make better decisions and stay focused on the most important things in their lives. However, McKeown acknowledges that in today's busy world, creating this space for exploration can feel impossible. Many of us have jam-packed schedules, constant deadlines, and never-ending to-do lists, but he insists that the time spent exploring is not wasted time. In fact, it's the most valuable time you can spend. By investing time in exploration, you gain the clarity needed to make better decisions and focus on what truly matters. This, in turn, leads to higher productivity and greater success in the long run. McKeown offers practical advice for creating space for exploration in your own life. One strategy is to block off time in your calendar specifically for thinking and reflection. Treat this time as sacred, just as you would a meeting with a boss or client. Use this time to step back from your daily tasks and think deeply about your goals, priorities, and challenges. Another strategy is to take regular breaks throughout the day, allowing yourself short periods of rest and recovery. These breaks give your mind the space it needs to process information and generate new ideas. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that exploration is not a luxury. It's a necessity. If you want to live like an essentialist, you must make time to explore what's truly important in your life. This process of exploration leads to greater clarity, focus, and purpose, allowing you to make better decisions and achieve more meaningful results. Chapter 6. Look, see what really matters. In the quiet spaces of reflection, we often find clarity, but to truly live as an essentialist, we must develop the ability to see what really matters in the noise of everyday life. In Chapter 6, Greg McKeown takes us deeper into the idea that essentialism is not just about eliminating the trivial, but also about sharpening our ability to recognize the essential. It's about cultivating the skill of observation, of seeing through the distractions, and focusing on the vital few. McKeown opens this chapter by reminding us that our world is noisy, chaotic, and filled with distractions, vying for our attention. The non-essentialist mind is overwhelmed by this constant barrage of information, leading us to make decisions reactively instead of thoughtfully. But the essentialist has learned to look beyond the noise, to identify the signals that point to what truly matters. This is not a skill that comes naturally for most of us. We've been conditioned to react, to respond immediately to every email, notification, or request that comes our way. But McKeown argues that in order to see what really matters, we need to train ourselves to pause, to reflect, and to observe carefully. The essentialist becomes like a detective, constantly scanning the environment for clues that reveal the essential, while ignoring the distractions that lead nowhere. McKeown uses the example of Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant and author, to illustrate this point. Drucker was known for his ability to see things that others missed. He had a knack for identifying the root cause of problems and finding simple, elegant solutions. His success came not from reacting to every issue that came his way, but from his ability to step back, observe, and focus on what truly mattered. One of the key lessons McKeown draws from Drucker's approach is the importance of listening. But not just listening in the traditional sense, listening to the quiet signals in your environment. McKeown calls this listening for what is not being said. In any situation, there are always underlying patterns, unspoken truths, and subtle cues that reveal what is truly important. The essentialist learns to tune into these signals and use them to guide their decisions. But how do we develop this skill? McKeown suggests that it starts with cultivating a mindset of curiosity and awareness. Instead of rushing from task to task, we need to slow down and observe what's happening around us. This could mean paying closer attention to the dynamics in a meeting, noticing patterns in your daily work, or even reflecting on your own emotional responses to situations. The goal is to become more attuned to the factors that are driving results, and to use this awareness to guide your actions. One of the biggest obstacles to seeing what matters is the fear of missing out, FOMO. We're often so afraid of missing an opportunity or falling behind that we fail to focus on the few things that will truly move the needle. McKeown argues that FOMO blinds us to the essential. When we're constantly distracted by what others are doing or by the latest trend or opportunity, we lose sight of our own path. The essentialist understands that success doesn't come from chasing every opportunity. It comes from focusing on the right opportunities. McKeown offers a powerful question to help guide our focus. What's the most important thing I can do right now? This question cuts through the noise and forces us to prioritize. Instead of reacting to the demands of the moment, we can step back and assess what really matters. It's a simple question, but one that requires discipline and practice. Over time, asking this question regularly helps train our minds to see what's essential even in the midst of chaos. Another important aspect of seeing what matters is learning to identify the hidden trade-offs in every decision. McKeown explains that for every decision we make, there are consequences, both seen and unseen. The non-essentialist often focuses only on the immediate, visible consequences of a decision, but the essentialist looks deeper, considering the long-term impact and the hidden costs. By understanding the full implications of our choices, we can make more informed decisions that align with our priorities. McKeown uses a practical example from the business world to illustrate this concept. He tells the story of an executive at a large company who was tasked with launching a new product. The executive was under intense pressure to get the product to market quickly, and the initial plan was to push forward aggressively, despite several red flags. But instead of reacting to the pressure, the executive took a step back and asked, "What's the most important thing we need to get right?" This simple question shifted the focus from speed to quality, and the team ended up delaying the launch to address the critical issues. While this decision meant missing the initial deadline, the product's success in the long run was far greater because the team focused on what truly mattered. This example highlights a key point in McKeown's philosophy. Sometimes, slowing down allows us to move faster in the long run. By taking the time to see what really matters, we can avoid costly mistakes and make decisions that lead to more sustainable success. But seeing what matters isn't just about big strategic decisions. It's also about the small, everyday choices we make. McKeown encourages us to develop the habit of constantly asking ourselves, "Is this the best use of my time and energy?" This question helps us stay focused on the essential, even in the midst of daily tasks and responsibilities. When we learn to see the difference between the urgent and the important, we can spend more time on activities that bring long-term value, rather than getting caught up in the whirlwind of busyness. Another powerful tool McKeown suggests for honing our ability to see what matters is to take time for reflection. Just as we explored in the previous chapter, reflection gives us the opportunity to step back and assess what's working, what's not, and where our focus should be. By regularly reflecting on our choices and actions, we can develop a clearer understanding of what's essential and make adjustments accordingly. McKeown also stresses the importance of eliminating distractions. The more distractions we allow into our lives, the harder it becomes to see what really matters. This could mean simplifying your workspace, turning off notifications, or setting boundaries around your time. The goal is to create an environment where you can focus on the essential without constantly being pulled in different directions. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that the ability to see what matters is a skill that can be developed, but it requires practice, patience, and a willingness to pause and reflect. The essentialist is not someone who rushes through life, reacting to every demand. Instead, they are someone who takes the time to observe, to reflect, and to focus on the few things that truly matter. Chapter 7. Play. Embrace the wisdom of your inner child. What if the key to discovering what is essential in life isn't more work, but more play? In Chapter 7 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown presents an idea that may seem counterintuitive at first. Play is not just a break from productivity, it's a vital part of it. Play, according to McKeown, is not only essential for our well-being, but also for fostering creativity, innovation, and clearer thinking. In a world that glorifies busyness, where play often feels like a waste of time, McKeown argues that we should reconnect with this powerful tool and give it a central place in our lives. Why play? McKeown opens this chapter with a profound insight. Play unlocks our creativity. It allows us to approach problems in new ways, helps us see connections we might otherwise miss, and fosters resilience. Play isn't just for kids. It's for anyone who wants to think more clearly, solve problems more effectively, and achieve better results. And yet, as we grow older, most of us abandon play in favor of more serious, structured activities. But by cutting play out of our lives, we lose a crucial tool for engaging with the world in a fresh and imaginative way. McKeown takes us through the science of play and explains how it benefits the brain. Neuroscientific research shows that play helps develop new neural connections that improve our ability to think creatively and solve problems. When we engage in play, whether it's through games, hobbies, or even simple daydreaming, our brains enter a state of relaxed alertness. This is where some of our most innovative ideas come from, when we're not directly focusing on the problem at hand, but allowing our minds to wander and explore different possibilities. Think about how many great ideas you've had while taking a walk, playing a sport, or just letting your mind drift during a leisurely activity. That's the power of play. McKeown points to a powerful example in the world of business, Silicon Valley, the epicenter of technological innovation. The culture of play is embraced by many tech companies that understand its value in fostering innovation. Google, for instance, is famous for its playful office environments, complete with ping-pong tables, video games, and nap pods. But this isn't just about having fun. It's about creating an atmosphere where employees can think creatively, collaborate freely, and explore new ideas without the constraints of rigid thinking. McKeown also dives into the history of some of the world's most brilliant thinkers and innovators, showing how play was integral to their success. Take Thomas Edison, for example. While Edison is often portrayed as a relentless worker, he also made plenty of time for playful experimentation. He would tinker with ideas and gadgets without a specific goal in mind, just to see what would happen. This kind of unstructured play led to many of his most important discoveries. Similarly, Albert Einstein was known to have engaged in playful activities, such as playing the violin, which helped him approach complex scientific problems with fresh perspectives. The connection between play and creativity is undeniable, and McKeown urges us to take it seriously. In the hustle and grind of modern life, play may seem frivolous, but it's actually one of the most productive things we can do. By incorporating play into our daily routines, we give ourselves the mental and emotional space to discover what's truly essential and to approach challenges with a fresh perspective. Play allows us to tap into parts of our minds that we often neglect when we're too focused on work, deadlines, or goals. But what exactly does McKeown mean by play? It doesn't necessarily mean playing games or engaging in physical activities, though those can certainly be forms of play. Play, in the context of essentialism, is about engaging in activities that are enjoyable, unstructured, and free of pressure. It's about giving yourself the freedom to explore without an agenda, to experiment without fear of failure, and to engage with the world in a light-hearted, imaginative way. This could be anything from doodling, playing with ideas, building something with your hands, or even daydreaming. One of the greatest benefits of play is that it helps us break out of rigid patterns of thinking. When we're under pressure to perform or solve a problem, we often default to the most logical, structured approach. But creativity thrives on flexibility. Play allows us to break free from conventional thinking and explore new possibilities. It opens up a world of what if and encourages us to take risks, make mistakes, and experiment in ways that lead to unexpected breakthroughs. Play also fosters resilience. In the face of challenges, play helps us stay flexible and adaptable. When we're able to approach problems with a playful mindset, we're less likely to feel defeated when things don't go as planned. Instead of getting stuck in frustration, we're more likely to bounce back and try again, exploring new solutions with curiosity rather than fear. This resilience is a key part of the essentialist mindset, understanding that failure is part of the process and that each setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. McKeown also touches on the emotional benefits of play. In a world that often feels heavy with responsibility, play provides much-needed relief and joy. It reconnects us with our inner child, reminding us that life doesn't always have to be serious and structured. Play helps us recharge emotionally, allowing us to return to our essential work with a renewed sense of energy and enthusiasm. So, how can we incorporate more play into our lives? McKeown offers a few practical suggestions. First, he encourages us to make time for unstructured activities that we enjoy, whether that's a hobby, a sport, or a creative pursuit. The key is to engage in activities without the pressure to achieve a specific outcome. Play should feel liberating, not like another task on your to-do list. Another suggestion is to embrace curiosity and experimentation in your work. Instead of always approaching tasks with a fixed plan, allow yourself to explore different possibilities. Ask, what if? Questions, experiment with new approaches, and give yourself the freedom to fail. This playful mindset can lead to surprising insights and innovations. Finally, McKeown encourages us to surround ourselves with people who value play. Whether it's at work or in our personal lives, being around others who embrace a playful, creative attitude can help us stay open to new ideas and maintain a sense of fun in our everyday lives. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has convinced us that play is not a waste of time. It's a critical part of living an essential life. Play helps us see the world in new ways, approach problems with creativity, and stay resilient in the face of challenges. It reminds us that life is not just about work and productivity. It's about joy, curiosity, and discovery. Chapter 8. Sleep. Protect the asset. If you've ever felt like there just aren't enough hours in the day to get everything done, you're not alone. In a world that glorifies hustle, busyness, and productivity, sleep is often seen as a luxury, something we can sacrifice to squeeze more work into our day. But in Chapter 8 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown flips this idea on its head and argues that sleep is not only essential, but also one of the most powerful tools we have to protect our most important asset, ourselves. McKeown begins this chapter by pointing out a simple but often overlooked truth. We are our most important asset. Without our health and well-being, we cannot perform at our best, make clear decisions, or focus on what truly matters. And yet, in our quest to do more, achieve more, and be more, we often sacrifice sleep, the very thing that enables us to function at a high level. The essentialist understands that sleep is not optional. It's a fundamental part of living a meaningful, productive life. In our culture, sleep deprivation is often worn as a badge of honor. We admire the people who work late into the night, who wake up before dawn, and who seem to run on endless amounts of energy. But McKeown reminds us that this is a dangerous myth. The reality is that sleep deprivation leads to poor decision-making, lower productivity, and eventually, burnout. When we don't get enough sleep, we lose our ability to discern what's essential and to perform at our highest level. McKeown tells the story of Thomas Edison, who famously believed that sleep was a waste of time. He would often work through the night, taking only short naps throughout the day. While Edison was undoubtedly a genius and made incredible contributions to the world, McKeown points out that Edison's attitude toward sleep may have also cost him in terms of health and longevity. Research has shown that chronic sleep deprivation leads to a host of negative outcomes, including reduced cognitive function, weakened immune systems, and an increased risk of chronic diseases. The science behind sleep is clear. Sleep is essential for memory consolidation, problem solving, emotional regulation, and overall brain health. During sleep, our brains process the information we've taken in during the day, organizing it and storing it in long-term memory. Sleep also helps us solve problems more effectively. How many times have you gone to bed with a difficult problem on your mind, only to wake up with the solution? This is because sleep allows the brain to make connections and integrate new information, leading to insights we might not have had when we were awake. But it's not just our brains that benefit from sleep. Our bodies do too. Sleep is the time when our bodies repair and rejuvenate themselves. Without adequate sleep, our physical health suffers, leading to fatigue, weakened immune function, and even an increased risk of accidents. McKeown drives home the point that by sacrificing sleep, we are sacrificing our most important asset, our ability to function at our best. So how does the essentialist approach sleep? McKeown makes it clear, the essentialist treats sleep as a priority, not as an afterthought. Instead of trying to fit sleep into an already overpacked schedule, the essentialist recognizes that sleep is a non-negotiable part of life. By getting enough rest, the essentialist ensures that they are operating at their peak performance during waking hours, allowing them to focus on what's truly important and make better decisions. McKeown presents a countercultural idea here. Instead of trying to do more with less sleep, we should be aiming to do less but better, with more sleep. This idea is not just about sleeping longer, it's about sleeping smarter. The goal is to protect the asset, your body and mind, so that you can function at your highest level during the day. One of the most striking examples McKeown provides is from the world of elite athletes. He tells the story of LeBron James, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. James is known for his relentless work ethic, but he is also known for his commitment to sleep. James reportedly sleeps between 10 and 12 hours a night, recognizing that sleep is critical to his ability to perform at an elite level. His commitment to sleep allows him to recover physically and mentally, ensuring that he is at his best when it matters most, on the court. If LeBron James, with his packed schedule and high-stakes career, can prioritize sleep, McKeown argues, so can we. The essentialist realizes that sleep is not a luxury, it's a necessity. By protecting our sleep, we are protecting our ability to make clear, focused decisions, to solve problems creatively, and to be fully present in our work and personal lives. McKeown also touches on the cultural shift that is starting to take place around sleep. More and more companies are recognizing the importance of rest and recovery for their employees. Companies like Google and Nike have introduced nap rooms and flexible work schedules to encourage employees to take breaks and get enough sleep. These companies understand that well-rested employees are more creative, more productive, and more engaged in their work. But how can we, as individuals, begin to prioritize sleep in our own lives? McKeown offers several practical strategies. First, he suggests creating a bedtime routine that signals to your body that it's time to wind down. This could include turning off electronic devices, reading a book, or practicing relaxation techniques like meditation or deep breathing. The goal is to create a calm, restful environment that promotes sleep. Another strategy is to be mindful of your sleep environment. Make sure your bedroom is cool, quiet, and dark, as these conditions are conducive to better sleep. If you find that your mind is racing before bed, try journaling or writing down your thoughts to clear your mind before sleep. McKeown also emphasizes the importance of consistency. Going to bed and waking up at the same time each day helps regulate your body's internal clock, making it easier to fall asleep and wake up feeling refreshed. One of the most important points McKeown makes in this chapter is the idea of permission. Many of us feel guilty about sleeping, as if we're wasting time that could be spent working or doing something more productive. But McKeown reminds us that sleep is one of the most productive things we can do. By giving ourselves permission to rest, we are investing in our ability to function at our best. The essentialist understands that sleep is not a hindrance to productivity, it's a crucial part of it. As we close this chapter, McKeown leaves us with a powerful reminder. You are your most valuable asset. If you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of anything else. Sleep is one of the simplest yet most effective ways to protect that asset. By making sleep a priority, we can enhance our creativity, improve our decision-making, and approach life with more energy and clarity. Chapter 9. Select. The Power of Extreme Criteria. We've all been there, faced with a decision that seems too difficult, where everything feels important and we're afraid to make the wrong choice. Should we take on that new project? Should we attend that meeting? Should we say yes to a new opportunity? In Chapter 9 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown introduces a powerful tool to help us make better decisions: the application of extreme criteria. When we're faced with a choice, McKeown urges us to ask ourselves one critical question: is this exactly what I want? If the answer is not a clear, resounding yes, then the answer should be no. This concept can seem harsh, especially in a world where we are conditioned to say yes to almost everything. But McKeown argues that if we want to live and work as essentialists, we must learn to be far more selective about what we allow into our lives. The power of extreme criteria lies in its ability to help us filter out the good but non-essential opportunities, so we can focus only on the best ones. It's about making decisions that are not just good enough, but are truly aligned with our highest goals and values. McKeown opens the chapter with an example from the world of venture capitalists. Successful venture capitalists are known for their ability to say no to the vast majority of investment opportunities that come their way. They might review hundreds of proposals each year, but they invest in only a handful. The reason is simple. They apply extreme criteria to every decision. If a potential investment doesn't meet their high standards, if it's not a hell yes, they pass. This disciplined approach allows them to focus their resources on the few opportunities that have the greatest potential for success. The lesson for us is clear. In a world of infinite options, the ability to say no becomes even more important than the ability to say yes. If we try to do everything, we spread ourselves too thin, and our efforts become diluted. But by applying extreme criteria, we force ourselves to focus only on the most important, impactful opportunities, the ones that truly matter. To help us internalize this practice, McKeown introduces the concept of the 90% rule. When faced with a decision, whether it's a personal commitment or a professional opportunity, rate it on a scale of 0 to 100. If it doesn't score at least a 90, it's an automatic no. This rule helps us avoid the trap of settling for things that are just good enough. By raising our standards, we ensure that we only commit to things that truly excite us and align with our priorities. One of the reasons we struggle to say no is that we often feel pressure from others, whether it's our boss, our family, or our social circles. We don't want to disappoint people, and we fear missing out on opportunities. But McKeown argues that when we say yes to things that don't meet our high standards, we are actually doing a disservice to ourselves and to others. By committing to non-essential activities, we become overextended, which means we can't give our best to the things that really matter. To illustrate this point, McKeown tells the story of a high-profile executive who was known for his extreme selectivity. This executive would often turn down speaking engagements, media appearances, and even lucrative business deals, not because they weren't good opportunities, but because they weren't the right opportunities. His refusal to settle for anything less than the best allowed him to focus on the few projects that truly mattered to him, and as a result, he was able to achieve extraordinary success. McKeown is clear. Applying extreme criteria is not about being selfish or saying no for the sake of saying no. It's about being deliberate and intentional with our time and energy. The essentialist knows that every yes comes with a trade-off. When we say yes to one thing, we are, by default, saying no to something else, often something that might be more important. The power of extreme criteria helps us avoid these unintentional trade-offs by forcing us to be more selective from the outset. One of the practical strategies McKeown offers for applying extreme criteria is the clarity break. When faced with a decision, take a moment to step back and reflect on whether the opportunity aligns with your core values and goals. Does it excite you? Does it bring you closer to where you want to be? Or are you saying yes out of fear, obligation, or the desire to please others? This pause for reflection can help you make more deliberate, thoughtful choices, rather than reacting to the pressure of the moment. McKeown also touches on the importance of consistency in applying extreme criteria. It's easy to get excited about an opportunity in the moment, but the key is to maintain high standards over time. He encourages us to keep revisiting our goals and priorities regularly, so we can ensure that we are staying true to our essential intent. By constantly filtering opportunities through the lens of extreme criteria, we avoid the gradual drift toward non-essential activities that can pull us off course. One of the common objections to applying extreme criteria is the fear of missing out, FOMO. We worry that if we say no to too many things, we'll miss a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But McKeown flips this fear on its head. He argues that the real risk is not missing out on opportunities, but rather missing out on the few truly great opportunities because we're too busy with everything else. By saying no to most things, we actually free ourselves up to say yes to the things that matter most. Another important point McKeown makes in this chapter is that applying extreme criteria doesn't mean being inflexible or closed-minded. It's not about rejecting every new idea or opportunity out of hand. Instead, it's about being open to the right opportunities, the ones that align with our values and long-term goals. It's about knowing when to say yes with full commitment and when to say no without guilt. McKeown also introduces the idea of exploration as part of this process. Before we can apply extreme criteria, we need to give ourselves the space to explore different options and possibilities. This means taking time to gather information, reflect on our goals, and understand what truly excites us. The essentialist doesn't rush into decisions. They take the time to explore and evaluate before committing. This exploratory phase allows them to make more informed choices and ensures that they are saying yes only to the most important opportunities. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has given us a powerful framework for making better decisions. The power of extreme criteria helps us filter out the noise and focus on the few things that will have the greatest impact on our lives. It's about raising our standards and refusing to settle for anything less than the best. This is not just about achieving more, it's about achieving more of what truly matters. Chapter 10. Clarify. One decision that makes 1,000. In the previous chapter, we learned how applying extreme criteria can help us make better decisions by ensuring that we only say yes to what truly matters. But what if there was a way to make decision-making even easier, to create a system where one decision could set the course for countless others? In Chapter 10 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown introduces us to the power of clarity, specifically the kind of clarity that can come from making one major decision that eliminates thousands of smaller, less important ones. The concept of clarity is foundational to the essentialist mindset. When we have clarity about our purpose, values, and priorities, decision-making becomes far simpler. Instead of agonizing over every choice that comes our way, we can use our clear sense of direction to guide us effortlessly. McKeown refers to this as one decision that makes 1,000, meaning that with a clear, decisive commitment to a single goal or value, many of life's smaller decisions fall into place automatically. The chapter opens with the story of a CEO who implemented a powerful strategy to bring clarity to his company's operations. His company was floundering, with employees stretched too thin and projects scattered across too many areas. The CEO realized that the problem wasn't a lack of effort, it was a lack of focus. He made a bold decision, The company would focus on just one major objective for the year, and everything that didn't support that objective would be put on hold or eliminated. This decision not only clarified the company's direction, but also simplified every future decision the team had to make. If a project or idea didn't contribute directly to the company's single objective, it was a no-go. The result? Productivity soared, and the company achieved its best financial performance in years. McKeown explains that clarity doesn't just come from making a long list of goals or priorities. In fact, too many goals can create confusion and overwhelm. True clarity comes from focusing on a single, overarching objective that can serve as a filter for all decisions. This objective becomes a guiding light, a touchstone that we return to every time we're faced with a choice. When we have this kind of clarity, we don't have to waste time and energy weighing every option. Most decisions become obvious because they either support the objective or they don't. McKeown offers a personal example of how clarity transformed his own life. He recalls a time when his work schedule was becoming unmanageable. He was saying yes to too many speaking engagements, consulting projects, and writing assignments, all of which were pulling him in different directions. After taking time to reflect on his priorities, McKeown realized that his primary goal was to spend more time with his family. Once he made this decision clear to himself, it became far easier to say no to opportunities that would take him away from his family, even if they were good opportunities. By clarifying his highest priority, McKeown was able to make countless decisions more easily. But how do we arrive at this kind of clarity in our own lives? McKeown offers several strategies for identifying our essential purpose and making it the guiding force behind our decisions. One powerful technique is to ask ourselves, if I could only accomplish one thing, what would it be? This question forces us to prioritize and focus on what truly matters. It cuts through the noise of competing interests and gets to the heart of what we value most. Another way to gain clarity is to think about our long-term vision. McKeown suggests imagining yourself at the end of your life and reflecting on what you want to have achieved. What legacy do you want to leave behind? What do you want people to remember you for? By starting with the end in mind, we can reverse engineer our lives and make decisions that align with our ultimate goals. McKeown also introduces the concept of essential intent. This is the clear, actionable goal that drives all other decisions. Unlike vague mission statements or broad goals, essential intent is specific and measurable. It gives us a concrete way to evaluate whether our daily actions are moving us toward or away from our objective. For example, instead of saying, I want to be healthier, an essential intent might be, I will run a marathon in 6 months. This kind of clarity provides a powerful framework for making decisions because it gives us a clear target to aim for. The beauty of essential intent is that it simplifies everything. When we have a clear, specific goal, we don't have to spend time deliberating over every choice. We simply ask ourselves, does this action move me closer to my essential intent? If the answer is no, the decision is made. By eliminating ambiguity and focusing on a single objective, we create a ripple effect that makes thousands of future decisions easier. McKeown explains that this principle doesn't just apply to individuals, it can also be transformative for organizations. He tells the story of Southwest Airlines, a company that achieved incredible success by sticking to a clear and simple essential intent, to be the low-cost airline. This clarity guided every decision the company made, from the routes they chose to the services they offered. Because of this clear focus, Southwest was able to avoid distractions and stay true to its mission, even when competitors were trying to lure them into expanding into more premium services. This kind of clarity requires discipline. It's easy to get distracted by new opportunities, shiny objects, or the latest trends. But the essentialist understands that clarity is what allows us to stay focused on what truly matters. When we are clear about our purpose, we don't have to constantly second-guess our decisions or wonder if we're on the right path. Clarity gives us confidence, direction, and a sense of calm in a world that is often chaotic and uncertain. McKeown also touches on the role of communication in achieving clarity. It's not enough to have clarity for ourselves. We must also communicate it clearly to others. This is especially important in organizations, where teams need to be aligned around a shared goal. When everyone is working toward the same essential intent, collaboration becomes easier and conflicts are minimized. But without clear communication, even the best intentions can lead to confusion and misalignment. One of the most powerful takeaways from this chapter is the idea that clarity isn't just about knowing what to do, it's about knowing what not to do. By clarifying our priorities, we also clarify what we're willing to let go of. This might mean saying no to good opportunities, letting go of old habits, or even walking away from projects that no longer serve our essential purpose. The essentialist is willing to make these sacrifices because they understand that clarity of purpose is what leads to long-term success. Chapter 11. Dare, the courage to be rude. If there's one thing most of us struggle with, it's saying no. We're conditioned to be agreeable, helpful, and accommodating, whether it's to please our boss, help a friend, or simply avoid conflict. But in Chapter 11 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown explains that to live as an essentialist, we must learn to say no with courage. It's not just about refusing tasks or commitments. It's about having the audacity to protect what's most important to us, even if it feels uncomfortable or, as McKeown phrases it, rude at times. McKeown begins this chapter by acknowledging a universal truth. Saying no feels awkward, and for many people, it feels like we're letting someone down or shirking a responsibility. However, he explains that this fear of discomfort leads us to overcommit and ultimately dilute our efforts in the areas that matter most. The essentialist knows that every yes comes with a cost, and sometimes saying yes to someone else means saying no to your own priorities. One of the first things McKeown points out is that learning to say no is not about being selfish or uncaring. Rather, it's about respecting your time and your commitments. Saying no allows us to protect our energy, focus on our essential tasks, and avoid burnout. The essentialist recognizes that in order to say yes to the truly important things, they must say no to the non-essential. McKeown shares an insightful story about a successful entrepreneur who found himself buried under too many commitments. The entrepreneur had grown his business by being a yes man, agreeing to every meeting, event, and opportunity that came his way. While this approach helped him build his business in the beginning, it eventually became unsustainable. His schedule was packed, his energy drained, and his ability to focus on the core aspects of his business suffered. He realized that if he wanted to continue growing and improving, he needed to start saying no, even to things that seemed like good opportunities. This shift allowed him to reclaim his time and focus on the areas that would truly drive his business forward. But why is it so hard to say no? McKeown explains that part of the problem lies in the way our brains are wired. We are social creatures, and from an evolutionary perspective, saying no can feel like we're risking rejection or conflict within our social group. Additionally, many of us are raised to believe that being helpful and accommodating is virtuous, while saying no is selfish or rude. However, McKeown argues that the real act of selfishness is saying yes when we don't have the bandwidth to follow through or give our best effort. By overcommitting, we end up disappointing others and ourselves. McKeown introduces the idea that saying no doesn't have to be harsh or abrupt. It can be done with grace and respect. He offers several practical strategies for saying no effectively, without damaging relationships or coming across as uncooperative. One approach he suggests is using what he calls the soft no with a strong yes. This involves acknowledging the other person's request, showing appreciation for the opportunity, and then offering a clear but respectful no. For example, if someone asks you to attend a meeting or take on a new project, you might say, "Thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate the offer, but I'm currently focused on insert your priority and won't be able to take this on right now." This approach allows you to say no while maintaining a positive tone and reinforcing your own priorities. The key, McKeown stresses, is to be firm in your decision. The essentialist doesn't waver or apologize for protecting their time and energy. Instead, they recognize that every no is an opportunity to say yes to something more important. McKeown also addresses the fear of missing out, FOMO, that often accompanies the act of saying no. Many of us are afraid that if we say no to an opportunity, we'll miss out on something great. But McKeown reminds us that the true danger lies in saying yes to too many things and missing out on what's truly essential. The essentialist understands that by saying no to the non-essential, they create space for the truly valuable opportunities that align with their goals and purpose. A powerful tool McKeown suggests for overcoming the discomfort of saying no is reframing the situation. Instead of viewing saying no as a negative act, think of it as a positive one. By saying no to one thing, you're actually saying yes to something else. Whether that's more time for your family, space to work on a critical project, or simply protecting your mental and emotional well-being. This mindset shift can help you feel more empowered when you need to say no, knowing that you're prioritizing what truly matters. In the business world, saying no can be especially difficult, as it often feels like we're turning down opportunities for growth or success. However, McKeown shares the example of Apple under Steve Jobs, highlighting how Jobs mastered the art of saying no. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was struggling under the weight of too many product lines. Jobs famously slashed the company's product offerings, reducing them from over 300 products to just 4. This decision was radical, and many thought it would hurt the company. But Jobs understood that by focusing on fewer products, Apple could innovate at a higher level and deliver better results. The lesson here is that saying no to the many allows you to say yes to the few things that can make a significant impact. McKeown also acknowledges that saying no can sometimes lead to short-term discomfort. People may be disappointed or frustrated by your refusal, but he encourages us to think about the long-term benefits. By saying no to non-essential tasks and commitments, you free yourself up to deliver higher quality work on the things that matter most. In the long run, this leads to better relationships, greater satisfaction, and more meaningful success. Another practical strategy McKeown offers is the use of delay tactics. If you're uncomfortable saying no outright, you can buy yourself some time by saying something like, "Let me think about it and get back to you." This gives you the space to evaluate the request and decide whether it aligns with your essential priorities. It also allows the other person to consider alternative solutions or to find someone else who might be better suited for the task. McKeown also emphasizes that we can't wait for permission to say no. Often, we look for external validation or approval before we turn something down, but the truth is, no one else can protect your time and energy for you. The essentialist takes responsibility for their own boundaries and doesn't wait for others to give them the green light. Saying no is a personal decision, and it's one that we have to make with confidence, knowing that we are doing what's best for ourselves and our priorities. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that the courage to say no is one of the most important skills an essentialist can develop. It's not about being rude or uncooperative. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are finite resources, and that in order to focus on what truly matters, you must protect those resources. The essentialist understands that every no is a strategic decision that allows them to say yes to the things that will bring the most value to their lives and work. Chapter 12. Uncommit. Win big by cutting your losses. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a cliff, holding onto a heavy rope that's anchored to something far below. The rope is pulling you down, weighing you down. But because you've already invested so much effort into holding on to it, you hesitate to let go. This is the predicament many of us find ourselves in when it comes to commitments we've made in the past. We feel tied to them because we've already spent time, money, or energy on them. In Chapter 12 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown explains the importance of uncommitting from tasks, projects, and decisions that no longer serve us. It's about understanding when to cut your losses, even when it feels difficult. At the heart of this chapter is the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, a concept from behavioral economics that describes our tendency to continue investing in something simply because we've already invested a significant amount of resources, even if continuing no longer makes sense. McKeown argues that this fallacy often leads us to stick with non-essential activities and commitments, out of fear that letting go would mean admitting failure or wasting previous efforts. But the essentialist understands that the real waste is in continuing to invest in something that no longer brings value. McKeown begins this chapter by sharing a powerful analogy, Imagine you've bought an expensive concert ticket months in advance. When the day of the concert arrives, you're exhausted, the weather is terrible, and you're dreading the idea of going. But because you've already spent money on the ticket, you force yourself to go, even though you won't enjoy the experience. This is the sunk cost fallacy in action. The essentialist, however, recognizes that the money spent on the ticket is gone. Nothing can bring it back. The best decision, then, is to ask yourself, what will bring me the most value right now? In this case, it might be staying home, resting, and doing something that will recharge your energy. The sunk cost fallacy can apply to all areas of our lives, whether it's a business project, a personal commitment, or even a relationship. We cling to things that are no longer working because we're afraid of losing what we've already invested. But McKeown encourages us to adopt a new mindset. Instead of focusing on the past, focus on the future. Ask yourself, is this commitment helping me achieve my essential goals? If the answer is no, it's time to uncommit. One of the most common reasons people struggle to uncommit is the fear of how others will perceive them. We worry about being seen as unreliable, flaky, or incapable of following through. But McKeown argues that true essentialists are not afraid to uncommit when they realize that a previous decision is no longer serving their highest purpose. It's not about failing to follow through. It's about being smart enough to recognize when something is no longer worth pursuing. To illustrate this point, McKeown shares the story of a business leader who made the difficult decision to cancel a major project that had already consumed millions of dollars and countless hours of work. The project was no longer viable, and continuing would only lead to more wasted resources. Despite the initial backlash from his team, the leader's decision to uncommit freed up resources that were then redirected toward more profitable ventures. The lesson here is clear. Sometimes, the most courageous and essential decision we can make is to let go of something that isn't working. But uncommitting isn't just about saving time or money. It's about protecting your ability to focus on what truly matters. McKeown offers a simple but powerful question to help guide your decision-making. If I weren't already involved, would I choose to start this now? If the answer is no, then it's a strong indicator that it's time to uncommit. This question helps us detach from the emotional weight of past investments and focus on what's relevant to our current goals. Another important concept McKeown introduces is the idea of opportunity cost. Every minute you spend on a non-essential commitment is a minute you're not spending on something that could be more valuable. By holding on to tasks and projects that no longer serve us, we're missing out on the opportunity to invest that time and energy into something better. The essentialist constantly evaluates the return on their investment of time and energy, and they're willing to let go of anything that isn't providing a significant return. McKeown also touches on the emotional aspect of uncommitting. Letting go of something we've been invested in, whether it's a project, a relationship, or even a long-held belief, can feel like a loss. We might experience guilt, regret, or even shame for not seeing something through to the end. But the essentialist understands that clinging to the past only prevents us from moving forward. By uncommitting, we free ourselves from the emotional and mental burden of maintaining something that no longer fits with our essential goals. One practical strategy McKeown suggests for uncommitting is to create an exit strategy. This means thinking ahead and identifying specific milestones or criteria that will help you decide when it's time to let go. For example, if you're working on a project that's not yielding the results you expected, set a deadline for when you'll evaluate its progress. If it hasn't reached a certain milestone by that time, give yourself permission to walk away. This approach allows you to make uncommitting a deliberate, thoughtful process rather than a reactive one. Another strategy McKeown offers is to give yourself a graceful exit. If you're worried about how others will perceive your decision to uncommit, find a way to step back that minimizes disruption and maintains your integrity. For example, if you're involved in a volunteer commitment that's taking up too much time, you might offer to help find a replacement or transition your responsibilities to someone else. By handling the uncommitment with care and respect, you can protect your relationships while still freeing yourself from the non-essential. Uncommitting can also apply to the way we structure our days. Many of us fill our schedules with non-essential tasks out of habit or obligation. McKeown suggests taking a close look at your daily to-do list and asking yourself, which of these tasks are truly essential? Anything that doesn't align with your priorities should be eliminated or delegated. By uncommitting from non-essential tasks, you can create more space for deep work, reflection, and rest. As we near the end of this chapter, McKeown reminds us that the ability to uncommit is a crucial skill for living a life of essentialism. It requires us to be honest with ourselves, to recognize when a past decision is no longer serving us, and to have the courage to cut our losses. The essentialist doesn't see uncommitting as a failure. They see it as a strategic move that allows them to focus on what's truly important. By the time we finish this chapter, it's clear that uncommitting is not just about letting go of past decisions. It's about reclaiming our time, energy, and focus for the future. McKeown leaves us with a final thought. The sooner you uncommit from something that's not working, the sooner you can invest in something that will. Chapter 13. Edit, the Invisible Art. Imagine you're watching a master editor at work. They take a rough draft filled with clutter, unnecessary words, sentences, and subplots, and skillfully trim it down to its essence. They remove the fluff, leaving only what's necessary to tell the story in the clearest, most impactful way. This is exactly what Greg McKeown invites us to do with our own lives in Chapter 13 of Essentialism. Become the editors of our lives, constantly refining and removing the non-essential to reveal what truly matters. McKeown begins this chapter by explaining that editing is not just about eliminating the bad, it's about cutting away the good to reveal the great. Just like a skilled writer who removes beautiful, well-written paragraphs because they don't serve the overall narrative, an essentialist must learn to eliminate even good opportunities, tasks, and commitments if they don't align with their highest priorities. This is the invisible art of editing. The analogy of editing is powerful because it forces us to think about our lives in terms of a story. Just as a story needs focus and clarity to be compelling, so do our lives. Without careful editing, our lives become cluttered with tasks and commitments that dilute our impact and distract us from what truly matters. The essentialist sees their life as a continuous work in progress, always refining and simplifying to keep the narrative clear and purposeful. One of the first steps in becoming an editor of your life is learning to adopt a mindset of constant evaluation. McKeown encourages us to regularly step back and ask ourselves, what can I edit out of my life to make space for the essential? This practice of continuous editing helps us stay focused on what's most important and prevents us from getting bogged down by non-essential tasks that creep into our daily routines. A key part of this process is learning to make trade-offs. McKeown reminds us that every decision we make, whether it's taking on a new project, attending a meeting, or saying yes to a social event, involves a trade-off. When we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. The essentialist understands this and deliberately chooses to edit out the non-essential to make room for the most important priorities. One of the most challenging aspects of editing our lives is letting go of things that are good but not essential. McKeown calls this the art of elimination. He explains that it's easy to justify keeping certain tasks, commitments, or projects because they seem valuable or because we've already invested time and energy into them. But the true power of essentialism comes from having the courage to eliminate even good things that don't directly contribute to our goals. To illustrate this, McKeown shares a story about Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time. Phelps didn't achieve greatness by trying to do everything. He achieved it by focusing intensely on swimming and cutting out distractions. From a young age, Phelps and his coach, Bob Bowman, made a deliberate decision to eliminate anything that didn't contribute to his swimming success. This meant sacrificing other sports, social events, and even hobbies so that Phelps could dedicate himself fully to his goal. The result was unparalleled success in his sport, and the lesson is clear. Editing out even good opportunities is sometimes necessary to achieve greatness in what matters most. But editing isn't just about cutting things out. It's also about simplifying what remains. McKeown encourages us to look for ways to streamline our daily routines, reduce complexity, and focus on the essential. This might involve simplifying your workspace, creating more efficient systems for managing tasks, or finding ways to automate repetitive tasks. By simplifying, we free up mental and physical space to focus on what truly matters. Another important aspect of editing is learning to say no. As we discussed in the previous chapter, saying no is a critical skill for living an essentialist life. But McKeown takes it a step further in this chapter by explaining that saying no is part of the editing process. Just as a writer cuts out unnecessary words to sharpen a story, we must learn to say no to unnecessary commitments to sharpen our focus. One strategy McKeown offers for saying no is the graceful no. This is a way of declining requests with respect and gratitude, while still protecting your time and energy. For example, instead of simply saying no to a request, you might say, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm focusing on other priorities right now." This approach allows you to protect your time without damaging relationships or appearing uncooperative. McKeown also introduces the idea of editing by design. This means proactively designing your life in a way that makes it easier to focus on the essential and eliminates distractions before they even arise. For example, you might block off time on your calendar for focused work so that meetings and other interruptions don't crowd your schedule. Or you might create a morning routine that sets the tone for the day and ensures that you start your day focused on your top priorities. By designing your life in this way, you create an environment that supports your essentialist goals. You're not just reacting to whatever comes your way. You're actively shaping your life to focus on what matters most. McKeown also touches on the importance of regularly reviewing and updating your priorities. Just as an editor revises a manuscript multiple times to get it just right, the essentialist understands that their priorities may change over time. What was essential last year might not be essential now. By regularly reviewing and updating your priorities, you ensure that your life remains aligned with your current goals and values. One practical tool McKeown suggests for editing your life is the quarterly review. Every 3 months, take some time to step back and evaluate your commitments, tasks, and projects. Ask yourself, what's working? What's not? What can I eliminate or simplify? This regular review process helps you stay on track and ensures that you're continually refining your focus. McKeown also emphasizes the importance of editing in your personal life. Just as we can overcommit at work, we can also overcommit in our personal lives, whether it's social events, hobbies, or even relationships. The essentialist understands that maintaining a balanced, fulfilling life requires the same discipline of editing. This might mean cutting back on social commitments to spend more time with family, or simplifying your personal routines to reduce stress. As we near the end of this chapter, McKeown leaves us with a powerful reminder. Editing is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong process. The essentialist is constantly refining, simplifying, and eliminating the non-essential to stay focused on what matters most. This ongoing practice of editing allows us to live with clarity, purpose, and impact. By the end of this chapter, it's clear that the invisible art of editing is a core skill for living an essentialist life. It's about being willing to let go of the good in pursuit of the great, simplifying what remains, and continuously refining our focus to align with our most important goals. Chapter 14. Limit: the freedom of setting boundaries. Imagine a beautiful garden thriving with flowers, plants, and trees. But this garden doesn't flourish on its own. It thrives because there are boundaries that protect it from weeds, pests, and overgrowth. Just like a garden, our lives need boundaries to protect what's essential. In Chapter 14 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown explores the importance of setting limits and boundaries to create space for the essential. He argues that boundaries don't restrict us. Instead, they give us freedom. Freedom to focus, to grow, and to live intentionally. McKeown begins the chapter by explaining why boundaries are crucial for living as an essentialist. In today's world, it can feel like there are no limits on the demands for our time and attention. Work can spill over into personal time, social media can fill every idle moment, and the expectations of others can constantly encroach on our own priorities. Without clear boundaries, we become overwhelmed and overextended, losing sight of what truly matters. But the essentialist understands that boundaries are not barriers. They are tools that help protect the most important parts of our lives. McKeown explains that by setting limits on our time, commitments, and availability, we can reclaim control over our lives and create the space needed to focus on what's essential. The first type of boundary McKeown encourages us to set is around our time. Time is our most valuable resource, yet it's often the most vulnerable to being hijacked by others' demands. McKeown suggests creating clear, non-negotiable blocks of time for essential activities, whether it's deep work, personal development, or spending time with family. By treating these time blocks as sacred, we protect our most important priorities from being crowded out by less important tasks. One of the most powerful examples McKeown shares in this chapter comes from the world of technology. He talks about how some of the most successful tech companies create innovation time off for their employees. Google, for instance, famously allows employees to spend 20% of their time working on personal projects that interest them. This boundary, giving employees the freedom to explore their own ideas, has led to some of Google's most innovative products, including Gmail. The lesson here is that boundaries, far from stifling creativity, can actually foster it. By limiting the time we spend on routine tasks, we give ourselves the space to think more deeply, explore new ideas, and focus on what really matters. McKeown also touches on the importance of setting boundaries around availability. In today's hyper-connected world, it's easy to feel like we need to be available 24/7, whether it's answering emails, responding to text messages, or attending endless meetings. But this constant availability comes at a high cost. It drains our energy and leaves little room for focused work or personal priorities. The essentialist, however, sets clear boundaries around their availability. They recognize that being available to everyone at all times dilutes their focus and hinders their ability to do deep, meaningful work. McKeown suggests that we adopt the practice of selective availability, meaning we are available to others only during specific times or for specific purposes. This might mean setting an email response time, limiting meetings to certain days of the week, or creating clear off times when you're not available for work-related tasks. These boundaries allow us to protect our time for the things that matter most. One of the key points McKeown makes in this chapter is that setting boundaries is not just about protecting our time, it's also about protecting our energy. He explains that our energy, like our time, is finite, and when we allow ourselves to be constantly drained by non-essential tasks and commitments, we have little left for the things that truly matter. By setting limits on how we spend our energy, we can ensure that we're directing it toward the areas of our lives that bring the greatest value. But setting boundaries requires courage. Many of us fear that by setting limits, we'll be seen as uncooperative, lazy, or unwilling to help. McKeown acknowledges this fear, but encourages us to recognize that boundaries are a form of self-respect. By setting limits, we are not rejecting others. We are simply protecting our ability to give our best to the things that truly matter. The essentialist understands that saying no to non-essential demands is not selfish. It's necessary for living a life of purpose and focus. McKeown offers several practical strategies for setting and maintaining boundaries. One strategy is to start small. If the idea of setting big, rigid boundaries feels overwhelming, begin by setting smaller limits. For example, you might decide to turn off email notifications during specific times of the day, or you might limit how often you check social media. As you become more comfortable with these small boundaries, you can gradually expand them to protect more of your time and energy. Another strategy McKeown suggests is to use positive framing when communicating your boundaries to others. Instead of simply saying no or setting a hard limit, explain why the boundary exists and how it benefits everyone involved. For example, you might say, "I'm blocking off time in the mornings for focused work so I can deliver my best results on this project." This framing helps others understand that the boundary isn't about shutting them out. It's about ensuring that you can give your best effort when it matters most. McKeown also addresses the idea of buffering, which involves creating extra space in your schedule to account for the unexpected. Life is unpredictable, and even the most carefully planned days can be disrupted by unforeseen events. By building buffers into your schedule, whether it's extra time between meetings or leaving room in your day for breaks, you give yourself the flexibility to handle surprises without becoming overwhelmed. These buffers act as a form of boundary, protecting your essential tasks from being derailed by unexpected demands. One of the most powerful insights in this chapter is the idea that boundaries are not just about saying no, they're about saying yes to the things that matter most. McKeown encourages us to reframe boundaries as tools for creating more freedom, not less. By setting limits on the non-essential, we free ourselves to focus on the essential. This mindset shift helps us see boundaries as a positive force in our lives, rather than something that restricts us. McKeown also emphasizes that boundaries are not rigid or unchangeable. The essentialist is flexible and understands that boundaries may need to be adjusted over time, depending on life circumstances or changing priorities. The key is to be intentional about when and how you adjust your boundaries, ensuring that they continue to protect your essential priorities. As the chapter draws to a close, McKeown leaves us with a powerful reminder. Setting boundaries is an act of self-care. It's about recognizing that you are your most important asset, and if you don't protect your time and energy, no one else will. Boundaries give you the freedom to focus on what truly matters, and they allow you to live a life that is purposeful, intentional, and aligned with your highest values. Chapter 15. Buffer: The Unfair Advantage. Life as we know it is unpredictable. Despite our best-laid plans, unexpected events often derail our schedules, throw us off course, and lead to stress or burnout. Whether it's an urgent last-minute task at work, a family emergency, or even just unexpected traffic on the way to a meeting, the unexpected is inevitable. In Chapter 15 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown introduces a concept that can help us navigate life's unpredictability with grace and calm: buffering. A buffer is the extra time, space, or resources we build into our schedules and lives to absorb the impact of the unexpected without losing our focus on the essential. McKeown begins the chapter by explaining why most people don't build buffers into their lives. We tend to assume that things will go according to plan, and we often schedule ourselves down to the minute, leaving no room for error. This mindset, he argues, is not just overly optimistic, it's unrealistic. When things don't go as expected, we find ourselves scrambling, stressed, and overwhelmed because there's no margin for error. The solution, according to McKeown, is to create deliberate space in our lives, buffers that give us room to breathe, think, and adjust when the unexpected happens. Buffers, McKeown argues, are a form of protection. Just as a financial buffer, savings, can protect us in times of economic hardship, a time buffer can protect our schedules and energy from being consumed by last-minute crises or unexpected demands. The essentialist, McKeown explains, recognizes that life will always present unexpected challenges, and they build buffers into their day, their projects, and their plans to absorb those shocks without losing momentum on what truly matters. One of the most common areas where buffers are needed is in our daily schedules. Many of us pack our calendars with back-to-back meetings, commitments, and tasks, leaving no room for the unplanned. The essentialist, however, understands that this approach is a recipe for disaster. Instead, they deliberately leave space between appointments or tasks, creating cushions of time that allow them to handle delays, interruptions, or the unexpected without being thrown off course. McKeown shares a simple but powerful example of how buffers can transform the way we handle stress. Imagine you're heading to a meeting that starts at 9 a.m. The drive normally takes 20 minutes, so you plan to leave at 8:30 a.m. sharp. But what happens if there's heavy traffic or an unexpected detour? If you've scheduled yourself too tightly, you'll likely arrive late, flustered, and stressed. However, if you build a buffer into your schedule, say by leaving 10 or 15 minutes earlier, you give yourself the flexibility to handle these unpredictable events calmly and still arrive on time, ready to focus on the essential. Buffers aren't just useful in daily schedules, they can be invaluable in project planning as well. McKeown explains that many projects fail to meet deadlines or go over budget because planners fail to account for the inevitable delays, setbacks, and surprises that arise along the way. The Essentialist builds buffers into project timelines and budgets, allowing for contingencies and ensuring that the project doesn't become derailed by unforeseen events. McKeown shares the story of Pixar, the famous animation studio, to illustrate the power of buffers in project planning. When Pixar creates a new movie, the team deliberately builds extra time into the production schedule to account for revisions, reworking scenes, and other unexpected challenges. This buffer allows Pixar to maintain its high standard of quality without rushing through the creative process or sacrificing the final product. The lesson here is that by allowing for the unexpected, we can achieve better results without the stress and panic that come from working under unrealistic deadlines. Another area where buffers can be incredibly useful is in our personal lives. McKeown encourages us to think about how we can create buffers in our relationships, our finances, and even our emotional well-being. For example, creating financial buffers, such as savings or an emergency fund, allows us to handle unexpected expenses without stress. Similarly, building emotional buffers, such as taking time for self-care or rest, helps us recharge and stay resilient in the face of life's challenges. McKeown explains that one of the most powerful benefits of creating buffers is that it gives us the ability to operate from a position of strength, not weakness. When we're constantly rushing from one thing to the next with no margin for error, we're operating in survival mode. Every unexpected event feels like a crisis, and we're constantly reacting instead of proactively focusing on what's essential. But when we have buffers in place, we have the freedom to respond thoughtfully and calmly to whatever comes our way. We can adjust, pivot, and stay focused on the bigger picture. One of the key points McKeown makes in this chapter is that buffers are not a luxury. They are a necessity. We live in an unpredictable world, and if we don't allow for contingencies, we will inevitably find ourselves stressed, overwhelmed, and burned out. The Essentialist understands that creating space in our lives for the unexpected is not only practical, but essential for maintaining focus and balance. But how do we go about creating these buffers in our lives? McKeown offers several practical strategies. First, he encourages us to evaluate our current schedules and commitments. Are we leaving any space between tasks, or are we packing our days too tightly? If your schedule feels suffocating, start by creating small buffers. Perhaps by leaving 10-15 minutes between meetings or blocking off time in your calendar for focused work or rest. Even small buffers can make a big difference in reducing stress and increasing flexibility. Another strategy is to adopt the mindset of less but better in your approach to tasks and projects. By focusing on fewer tasks, you can allow more time and attention to each one, which naturally creates buffers. If you're juggling too many responsibilities, consider which ones you can eliminate or delegate to create more space for the essential tasks that truly matter. McKeown also suggests building financial buffers as a way to reduce stress and uncertainty in your personal life. By saving regularly and creating an emergency fund, you give yourself the freedom to handle unexpected expenses without financial strain. This buffer allows you to stay focused on your long-term financial goals rather than getting caught up in short-term crises. One particularly insightful idea McKeown shares is the importance of emotional buffers. Life's challenges don't just affect our schedules, they affect our mental and emotional well-being. The Essentialist understands that emotional resilience is key to staying focused and grounded, especially when faced with unexpected setbacks. McKeown encourages us to create emotional buffers by prioritizing self-care, rest, and downtime. Whether it's taking time for meditation, exercise, or simply enjoying a hobby, these emotional buffers help us recharge and handle life's inevitable ups and downs with grace. As the chapter draws to a close, McKeown reminds us that creating buffers is about more than just preventing stress. It's about creating space for what truly matters. When we have buffers in place, we're able to respond to life's challenges thoughtfully rather than reactively. We can stay focused on the essential, even in the face of uncertainty. This ability to handle the unexpected with calm and confidence is, McKeown argues, one of the greatest advantages of living as an essentialist. Chapter 16. Subtract. Bring forth more by removing obstacles. Imagine sculpting a statue from a block of marble. The sculptor doesn't add more to the block to reveal the masterpiece. Instead, they remove the excess, chipping away piece by piece until only the essential remains. This is the art of subtraction, and in Chapter 16 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown applies this principle to our lives. Subtraction, removing obstacles and unnecessary tasks, is one of the most powerful ways to bring forth more of what truly matters. By clearing away the non-essential, we reveal the essential, just like the sculptor reveals the statue. McKeown begins by addressing a common misconception that in order to achieve more, we need to do more. This more is more mindset leads to overcommitment, busyness, and burnout as we pile more tasks, projects, and responsibilities onto our already full plates. But McKeown argues that true productivity and success come not from doing more, but from doing less. Specifically, from removing the things that get in the way of our ability to focus on what's truly important. He introduces the concept of removing obstacles as a central part of the essentialist mindset. Just as a sculptor removes excess material to reveal the beauty within, the essentialist removes distractions, unnecessary tasks, and barriers to productivity in order to unlock their full potential. By subtracting the non-essential, we free up time, energy, and resources to invest in the activities that bring the greatest value. One of the first steps in applying the power of subtraction is to identify the obstacles that are holding you back. McKeown explains that these obstacles can take many forms: physical clutter, unnecessary meetings, excessive commitments, or even self-imposed limitations like perfectionism or procrastination. The key is to recognize that these obstacles are preventing you from focusing on your essential goals, and the solution is not to add more to your plate, but to remove these barriers. McKeown shares an example from the business world that highlights the power of subtraction. He tells the story of a company that was struggling to increase its profitability. The leadership team initially assumed that the solution was to push harder, increase sales, and ramp up production. But after a thorough analysis, they realized that the real problem was inefficiency within the company's operations. There were too many processes, too many meetings, and too much redundancy. Instead of adding more, the company decided to subtract. They streamlined their operations, eliminated unnecessary tasks, and cut back on waste. The result was not just an increase in profitability, but a more focused and productive workforce. The lesson here is clear. Sometimes the most effective way to achieve more is to do less. By removing the obstacles that clutter our lives and drain our energy, we create space for what's truly essential. McKeown also touches on the emotional and psychological obstacles that can prevent us from subtracting the non-essential. Many of us have a hard time letting go of tasks, projects, or commitments because we feel guilty, responsible, or fearful of missing out. This emotional attachment to the non-essential often keeps us stuck, even when we know we should be letting go. But the essentialist understands that subtraction is not about abandoning responsibilities or failing to follow through. It's about making intentional choices to focus on what brings the greatest return on investment. One of the most powerful strategies McKeown offers for embracing subtraction is to adopt a zero-based mindset. In accounting, zero-based budgeting means starting from scratch and justifying every expense, rather than simply building on the previous year's budget. McKeown suggests applying this same principle to our commitments and tasks. Instead of assuming that everything on your to-do list is necessary, start from zero and ask yourself, if I were starting over, would I take on this task or commitment? If the answer is no, it's time to subtract it from your life. McKeown also provides a practical tool for identifying obstacles, the clarity checklist. This checklist involves asking yourself a series of questions designed to help you pinpoint the things that are standing in the way of your essential work. Questions like, what is preventing me from focusing on the most important task right now? Or, what unnecessary steps can I eliminate from this process? Help you identify the specific barriers that are holding you back so you can take deliberate action to remove them. One of the key takeaways from this chapter is that subtraction is not just about getting rid of tasks or commitments. It's about removing anything that is hindering your ability to focus on the essential. This could mean decluttering your physical workspace to create a more focused environment, eliminating distractions like social media or email notifications, or even letting go of mental clutter by simplifying your decision-making process. The goal is to remove the barriers that are preventing you from reaching your full potential. McKeown highlights the example of Michelangelo's famous sculpture of David to illustrate this point. When asked how he created such a masterpiece, Michelangelo is said to have replied, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." This idea of subtraction, removing the unnecessary to reveal the essential, is at the heart of essentialism. Just as Michelangelo didn't need to add anything to the marble to create his masterpiece, we don't need to add more to our lives to achieve success. Instead, we need to remove the obstacles that are obscuring our path. McKeown also addresses the concept of routine maintenance as part of the subtraction process. Just as a car needs regular maintenance to stay in good working order, our lives need regular editing and refining to stay focused on the essential. He encourages us to regularly step back and ask ourselves, what can I eliminate or simplify? By making subtraction a regular practice, we ensure that our lives remain streamlined and focused on what truly matters. One of the most powerful aspects of subtraction is that it creates a ripple effect. When we remove one obstacle, it often leads to the removal of others. For example, if you subtract unnecessary meetings from your schedule, you not only free up time, but also reduce the mental fatigue and stress that come with back-to-back commitments. This, in turn, gives you more energy and focus to tackle your most important tasks. The power of subtraction is cumulative. The more you subtract, the more you free yourself to focus on the essential. As the chapter comes to a close, McKeown emphasizes that subtraction is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about creating space for the things that bring the most value to your life and work. By removing the obstacles that stand in your way, you give yourself the freedom to focus on what truly matters. Chapter 17, Progress, the Power of Small Wins. We all dream of making significant progress in our lives, of achieving great goals that reflect our deepest aspirations. But too often, the enormity of those dreams leaves us feeling overwhelmed, paralyzed by the sheer scale of what we want to accomplish. In Chapter 17 of Essentialism, Greg McKeown introduces us to a powerful concept that can help us overcome this paralysis: the power of small wins. Rather than waiting for sweeping victories or massive breakthroughs, the essentialist focuses on making consistent, incremental progress toward their most important goals. McKeown begins by explaining that small wins are the key to building momentum. We often think that success comes from dramatic, game-changing efforts, but in reality, it's the accumulation of small, consistent actions that leads to long-term success. Each small win builds confidence, creates motivation, and generates forward motion, making it easier to tackle the next step. The essentialist doesn't aim for immediate perfection or huge leaps. They aim to make steady progress, one small win at a time. The psychology behind small wins is deeply rooted in how our brains process success and failure. McKeown draws on research that shows how even the smallest achievements trigger a release of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. This makes us feel good about what we've accomplished, and in turn, motivates us to keep going. Each small win reinforces the belief that we're moving in the right direction, creating a virtuous cycle of progress and motivation. One of the most powerful examples McKeown shares is from the world of business. He tells the story of IBM's early strategy when the company was trying to establish itself as a dominant force in the tech industry. Instead of setting lofty, unattainable goals, IBM's leadership focused on creating a culture of small wins. Employees were encouraged to set modest, achievable targets for each day or week, and each time they hit a target, they celebrated the success. Over time, these small wins added up to massive progress, helping IBM grow into one of the most successful companies in the world. The lesson here is clear: small wins compound over time. When we break down our big, audacious goals into manageable pieces and focus on achieving one small victory at a time, we build a sense of momentum that carries us forward. It's the same principle that makes saving small amounts of money consistently so effective. It may not seem like much in the moment, but over time, the cumulative effect can be extraordinary. McKeown explains that the essentialist approach to progress is to think in terms of minimum viable progress. Instead of obsessing over massive leaps forward or trying to do everything at once, the essentialist asks, what's the smallest step I can take right now that will move me closer to my goal? By focusing on minimum viable progress, we reduce the pressure we put on ourselves and make it easier to take action. Each small step feels manageable, and before we know it, those steps add up to significant progress. A key part of embracing the power of small wins is learning to celebrate each victory, no matter how small it may seem. McKeown encourages us to recognize and acknowledge the small steps we take toward our goals, as this reinforces the positive feedback loop that keeps us motivated. Too often, we overlook small wins because we're focused on the bigger picture. But McKeown argues that every step forward is worth celebrating, as it brings us closer to the essential. He also explains that small wins are particularly effective because they create a sense of control. When we focus on small, achievable goals, we regain a feeling of agency over our lives. We're no longer at the mercy of overwhelming, distant objectives. We can see the progress we're making, and that empowers us to keep going. This sense of control is crucial for maintaining motivation and staying on track, especially when the road ahead feels long. McKeown shares a powerful personal story about how small wins helped him during a particularly challenging period in his life. He was working on a major project, and the enormity of the task left him feeling stuck. He found himself procrastinating, unable to make any meaningful progress. But instead of trying to force himself to tackle the entire project at once, he decided to focus on one small step at a time. He set a goal to write just one paragraph each day. Over time, those paragraphs turned into pages, and eventually, the project was completed. The small wins he achieved each day built momentum and gave him the confidence to keep going, even when the overall task felt overwhelming. This principle of focusing on small wins can be applied to any area of life, from work to personal development to relationships. McKeown encourages us to ask ourselves, what is one small thing I can do today to move forward? This might be sending an email, making a phone call, or dedicating just 10 minutes to a project. It doesn't matter how small the action is. What matters is that you're taking a step in the right direction. Another powerful aspect of small wins is that they help us overcome perfectionism. Many of us struggle with the belief that we need to do things perfectly or not at all. But this mindset can be paralyzing, preventing us from making any progress at all. McKeown argues that by focusing on small wins, we can overcome the perfectionist tendency to wait until everything is just right. Small wins remind us that progress is better than perfection, and that even imperfect action is better than no action. McKeown also touches on the importance of measuring progress. By keeping track of the small wins we achieve, we can see just how far we've come, even if it doesn't always feel like it. This could be as simple as keeping a journal, using a progress tracker, or setting small milestones that mark your progress toward a larger goal. The act of measuring and tracking small wins reinforces the sense of accomplishment and keeps us motivated to keep going. One of the most powerful insights McKeown shares in this chapter is the idea that small wins help us build resilience. Life is full of setbacks, and when we focus solely on big, long-term goals, those setbacks can feel devastating. But when we focus on small wins, we give ourselves the emotional buffer we need to handle challenges. Each small win becomes a reminder that we're capable of making progress, even in the face of adversity. This resilience is what allows the essentialist to stay on course, no matter what obstacles arise. By the end of the chapter, McKeown has made it clear that progress doesn't have to be dramatic or monumental to be meaningful. The key to success, he argues, is to focus on making small, consistent gains every day. Over time, these small wins compound into significant achievements, helping us move steadily toward our essential goals. Chapter 18, Flow, the Genius of Routine. As we move toward the conclusion of essentialism, Greg McKeown presents an idea that ties everything together: creating routines that allow for sustained progress without burning out. In Chapter 18, he explores the concept of flow and how building consistent routines can make the path to achieving the essential not only easier, but also more sustainable and enjoyable. Just as a river flows steadily toward its destination, the essentialist creates a life that flows naturally by establishing routines that keep them moving forward, day after day, with minimal friction. McKeown begins by discussing how high achievers across various fields, athletes, artists, writers, and business leaders, use routines to achieve remarkable success. Rather than relying on willpower alone, these individuals design their lives around habits and systems that support their essential goals. This allows them to stay in a state of flow, where they can perform at their best without constantly battling distractions or decision fatigue. The key, McKeown argues, is to eliminate the need for constant decision-making by creating automatic routines that support what's most important. Flow, as McKeown describes it, is a mental state where we are fully immersed in an activity, experiencing a sense of effortless concentration and enjoyment. When we're in flow, we lose track of time, and the work seems to happen naturally. But flow doesn't happen by accident. It requires careful planning and the creation of environments that support it. This is where routines come into play. Routines are not about rigidity or controlling every minute of your day. Instead, McKeown explains that routines help remove the guesswork and mental effort from repetitive tasks, freeing up mental energy for more creative and focused work. When we establish routines for the mundane or predictable parts of our lives, we reserve our brain power for more complex decisions and tasks that require deeper focus. For example, having a consistent morning routine means we don't waste energy deciding how to start the day. Instead, we automatically move into the actions that prepare us for success. McKeown shares the example of Steve Jobs, who famously wore the same style of clothing every day. By simplifying his wardrobe, Jobs eliminated one small but unnecessary decision from his day, allowing him to focus his energy on more important tasks. This may seem trivial, but it reflects a deeper principle of essentialism. The more we can automate non-essential decisions, the more we can concentrate on the things that truly matter. The power of routine is not just about efficiency, it's also about creating a sense of stability and rhythm in our lives. McKeown explains that routines provide structure, which in turn creates a sense of calm and focus. When we have predictable routines, we reduce the mental clutter that comes from constant decision-making, and we're better able to enter a state of flow. This is particularly important when we're pursuing long-term goals that require sustained effort over time. McKeown also emphasizes that routines don't have to be complex or time-consuming. In fact, simplicity is key. The best routines are the ones that are easy to follow and don't require too much mental or physical effort. The goal is to design routines that support your essential activities without overwhelming you. For example, a simple morning routine might involve 15 minutes of meditation, followed by a healthy breakfast and 30 minutes of focused work. This routine sets a positive tone for the day and ensures that you start the day with clarity and purpose. One of the key takeaways from this chapter is the importance of consistency. McKeown explains that consistency, not intensity, is what drives long-term success. Rather than trying to make massive progress in short bursts of effort, the essentialist focuses on making steady, consistent progress every day. This approach is not only more sustainable, but also more effective in the long run. Just as a steady stream of water can carve through rock over time, consistent effort, guided by routine, can lead to significant achievements. McKeown shares another powerful example from the world of sports. He talks about how top athletes, like tennis champion Serena Williams, rely on routines to maintain their performance over the long term. Williams has a strict training and preparation routine that she follows before every match, regardless of the stakes. This routine helps her stay focused, calm, and ready to perform at her best, even in high-pressure situations. The consistency of her routine ensures that she's always in peak condition, both physically and mentally. But routines are not just for elite athletes or high-powered executives. McKeown argues that everyone can benefit from creating routines that support their essential goals. Whether it's a daily writing habit, a workout routine, or a regular practice of gratitude, routines help us stay on track and make meaningful progress toward our goals, even when life gets busy or unpredictable. One of the practical strategies McKeown offers for establishing routines is to start small. He encourages us to identify 1 or 2 key activities that align with our essential goals and build a simple routine around them. For example, if your goal is to improve your health, you might start by creating a routine that involves a 20-minute walk every morning. Or if your goal is to write a book, you could establish a routine of writing for 30 minutes every day, no matter what. The key is to start with manageable routines that are easy to maintain, and over time, you can expand or refine them as needed. Another important aspect of creating flow through routine is building in time for rest and recovery. McKeown explains that flow isn't about working nonstop, it's about finding a balance between focused work and rejuvenation. Just as athletes need rest days to recover and avoid burnout, we also need to create space in our routines for rest, reflection, and self-care. This could be as simple as scheduling regular breaks throughout the day, setting aside time for a hobby, or making sure you get enough sleep each night. McKeown also touches on the importance of adapting your routines as your priorities and circumstances change. Life is dynamic, and so are our needs. The essentialist is flexible and understands that routines are meant to serve our goals, not the other way around. If a routine no longer supports your essential priorities, it's time to revise or replace it. The goal is to create routines that evolve with you, keeping you in a state of flow as you pursue what's most important. One of the most powerful benefits of creating routines is that they help us build momentum. McKeown explains that when we establish consistent routines, we create a virtuous cycle of productivity and focus. Each day's progress builds on the last, creating a sense of forward motion that makes it easier to keep going. This momentum is crucial for staying motivated and avoiding the feeling of being stuck or stagnant. As the chapter comes to a close, McKeown reminds us that the genius of routine lies in its ability to make progress feel effortless. By designing our lives around routines that support our essential goals, we create a natural flow that keeps us moving forward day after day. This flow allows us to focus on what truly matters without constantly battling distractions or decision fatigue. Chapter 19. Focus. What's important now? As we near the conclusion of essentialism, Greg McKeown turns his attention to a crucial element of living an essentialist life: the ability to focus on the present moment. In Chapter 19, McKeown delves into the importance of focusing on what's important now, and how being fully engaged in the present allows us to make better decisions and act more effectively, rather than worrying about future uncertainties or being pulled in multiple directions by distractions. The essentialist learns to narrow their attention to the task at hand, embracing the power of the moment. McKeown begins this chapter by explaining how our minds are often scattered, constantly switching between past regrets, future anxieties, and the demands of the present. This fragmentation of attention not only reduces our effectiveness, but also prevents us from fully experiencing and appreciating the present. The essentialist, however, makes a deliberate choice to focus on the here and now, recognizing that the present is the only time when we can truly act. He shares a personal story about his own struggle with being fully present. McKeown recalls a time when he was juggling multiple work projects while also trying to spend time with his family. He was physically present with his children, but his mind was elsewhere, focused on emails, deadlines, and future plans. One day, his daughter asked him a simple but profound question. "Daddy, why are you here if you're not really here?" This question made McKeown realize that even though he was spending time with his family, he wasn't truly engaging with them. His attention was divided, and as a result, he was missing out on the most important moments. This experience led McKeown to a powerful realization. Being present is not just about physically showing up, it's about mentally and emotionally committing to the moment. The essentialist understands that in order to do their best work and live a fulfilling life, they must learn to focus on what's important right now. This focus on the present allows them to be fully engaged in whatever they're doing, whether it's working on a project, spending time with loved ones, or simply enjoying a quiet moment of reflection. McKeown explains that one of the most significant barriers to being present is the constant flood of distractions we face in modern life. Our phones buzz with notifications, our inboxes are never empty, and we're often pulled into meetings or tasks that feel urgent but are not truly important. The essentialist learns to filter out these distractions and focus on the task at hand. McKeown emphasizes that it's not about multitasking or trying to do everything at once. It's about prioritizing and giving your full attention to one thing at a time. To illustrate this point, McKeown shares the example of a professional athlete who excels in their sport by being fully focused on the present moment. Athletes like Michael Jordan or Serena Williams are not thinking about their past mistakes or future outcomes when they're competing. They are completely focused on the game, on the next shot, on the present action. This intense focus allows them to perform at their highest level without being distracted by what has happened or what might happen. McKeown argues that we can all benefit from adopting this mindset of focusing on what's important now. By narrowing our attention to the present moment, we become more effective, more creative, and more fulfilled. We stop worrying about things we can't control, like the past or the future, and instead, we put our energy into what we can control, the actions we take right now. One of the most practical strategies McKeown offers for staying focused on the present is to regularly ask ourselves the question, what's important now? This simple question helps us cut through the noise and identify the single most important thing we should be doing in any given moment. Whether we're at work, at home, or even in a social setting, asking this question allows us to stay grounded in the present and avoid being pulled in multiple directions by competing demands. McKeown also discusses the importance of setting boundaries around your attention. In a world where distractions are constant, we need to be proactive in protecting our focus. This might mean turning off notifications, setting specific times for checking email, or creating physical boundaries, like closing the door to your office when you need to concentrate. The essentialist understands that focus is a precious resource, and they take deliberate steps to protect it from being diluted by distractions. Another key aspect of focusing on the present is learning to say no to things that don't align with your immediate priorities. McKeown explains that saying no is not just about declining long-term commitments or projects. It's also about saying no to the small, everyday distractions that can pull you away from what's important now. This might mean saying no to checking social media during work hours or declining a last-minute meeting that isn't essential. By saying no to distractions, you create more space to focus on what truly matters in the present. McKeown also touches on the concept of mindfulness as a tool for cultivating presence. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment, without judgment. It's about fully experiencing whatever is happening right now, whether it's a conversation, a task, or even just a moment of stillness. McKeown explains that mindfulness can help us break the habit of constantly being in reaction mode, where we're always responding to external stimuli, and instead bring our focus back to the present. By practicing mindfulness, we train our minds to stay centered on the here and now, even in the face of distractions or challenges. A powerful benefit of focusing on the present is that it allows us to make better decisions. When our attention is scattered, we're more likely to make impulsive or poorly thought-out choices. But when we're fully engaged in the present, we can think more clearly, weigh our options, and make decisions that are aligned with our essential priorities. McKeown explains that the essentialist doesn't rush through decisions or act out of a sense of urgency. Instead, they take the time to fully consider what's important now and make deliberate choices based on that clarity. By the end of this chapter, McKeown has made it clear that the ability to focus on the present is one of the most important skills an essentialist can develop. It's not about ignoring the future or disregarding the past. It's about recognizing that the present is where we have the most power to act. When we focus on what's important now, we not only become more productive and effective, but we also experience a deeper sense of fulfillment and connection with the world around us. Chapter 20. B. The Essentialist Life. In the final chapter of Essentialism, Greg McKeown brings everything together by exploring what it means to live an essentialist life, a life where the pursuit of the essential becomes second nature, and every action flows naturally from a clear sense of purpose and priority. This chapter is about transcending the mechanics of essentialism and embracing it as a way of being, a lifestyle that brings peace, clarity, and joy through the constant practice of focusing on what truly matters. McKeown begins by explaining that the ultimate goal of essentialism is not simply to achieve more or to be more productive. It's to live a life of meaning and purpose, where we are fully aligned with our highest values. In the earlier chapters, we learned how to apply the principles of essentialism to our daily lives through practices like saying no, setting boundaries, creating routines, and focusing on small wins. But in this final chapter, McKeown challenges us to take it one step further, to internalize essentialism as a mindset and approach to life that becomes effortless and natural. This idea of effortlessness is central to the essentialist life. McKeown explains that when we live in alignment with our essential purpose, life feels less like a struggle and more like a flow. Decisions become easier, actions feel more meaningful, and even challenges are met with greater resilience. This doesn't mean that life is without difficulties, but it does mean that we approach those difficulties with a clear sense of what's truly important and the confidence that we are acting in accordance with our values. McKeown introduces the concept of effortless execution as the pinnacle of the essentialist life. This is the idea that when we focus on what truly matters and eliminate the non-essential, our work and lives naturally flow in a way that feels less forced and more fulfilling. Instead of pushing ourselves to do more, we create systems, routines, and habits that make progress feel natural. This is the genius of the essentialist life. It's not about constantly striving, but about living in harmony with what's most important, so that success comes as a natural result of clarity and focus. To live this kind of life, McKeown encourages us to ask ourselves a few key questions. Am I aligned with my essential purpose? This question forces us to reflect on whether the way we're living truly reflects what we care about most. Are we spending our time on the things that bring us the greatest joy, meaning, and fulfillment? Or are we getting distracted by the noise of everyday life? What can I remove to make my life simpler and more focused? Even after practicing essentialism for a while, it's easy for non-essential tasks and commitments to creep back into our lives. Regularly revisiting this question helps us continue to refine and simplify, ensuring that we stay focused on what matters. How can I create more flow in my daily life? This is about designing our lives in a way that makes it easier to focus on the essential. Whether it's through routines, habits, or changes in our environment, we can always look for ways to reduce friction and make progress more effortless. McKeown shares a story about a company that embraced the principles of essentialism so deeply that it transformed its entire culture. This company had once been bogged down by bureaucracy, excessive meetings, and endless approvals. But after adopting an essentialist approach, they began to simplify their processes, cut down on unnecessary tasks, and empower employees to focus on what really mattered. The result was not just a more efficient organization, but one where people felt more engaged, creative, and fulfilled. This transformation was not just about getting more done. It was about creating a culture where the essential was prioritized and the non-essential was left behind. McKeown also touches on the importance of maintaining an essentialist mindset in the face of external pressures. Even when we are clear about our essential priorities, the world around us often pushes us to take on more, to move faster, or to chase after things that don't truly align with our values. The essentialist life requires us to stay grounded in our purpose and to resist the temptation to do more for the sake of doing more. It's about having the discipline to say no when necessary, to slow down when needed, and to trust that focusing on the essential will lead to the greatest success and fulfillment. One of the most profound insights McKeown shares in this chapter is the idea that living an essentialist life is not just about what we do, it's about who we are. Essentialism is not a set of tasks to check off a list. It's a way of being that shapes how we approach everything in life. When we live as essentialists, we become more intentional, more present, and more connected to what truly matters. This shift in mindset allows us to experience life more fully, without the constant pressure to do more, be more, or achieve more. McKeown encourages us to think of essentialism as a journey, not a destination. There is no point at which we arrive at being an essentialist. It's a continuous process of refining, simplifying, and focusing on the essential. Along the way, we will encounter challenges and setbacks, but the key is to keep returning to the core principles of essentialism. Focus on what's important, eliminate what's not, and create space for what truly matters. As the book comes to a close, McKeown leaves us with a final thought. The essentialist life is one of meaning and purpose, not just efficiency and productivity. It's about living with intention, embracing what's most important, and letting go of everything else. By focusing on the essential, we create lives that are not only more successful, but also more joyful, more peaceful, and more fulfilling. The journey to essentialism may begin with practical strategies like saying no, setting boundaries, and simplifying our schedules, but it ultimately leads to something much deeper, a life of clarity, focus, and purpose, where everything we do is aligned with what matters most.